Hello, everyone. Welcome to TruRating's July webinar, Navigating the Retail Landscape and Thriving Amidst Uncertainty. I'm Marty Schechter. I'll be your host. I'm the Chief Product Officer at TruRating. Today, we have an amazing fireside chat in store with two experienced retail professionals. But before I turn to introductions, I first want to give you a brief overview of TruRating. Our founder, Georgina Nelson, started TruRating because she wanted to put the same level of data into the hands of in-store retailers as the digital giants had access to. And we're able to capture the highest response rates in the industry because we put consumers at the heart. First, by making sure providing feedback is easy. It's part of the checkout workflow, and responses are always anonymous. Secondly, because feeding back goes towards a good cause. When a consumer rates, TruRating donates to one of 3 children's charities around the world. Thirdly, feeding back provides trusted and verified ratings for online social proof, which combats the fake and polarized ratings that exist through other solutions. And finally, feeding back provides retailers with reliable data to provide better experiences back to their customers. And I also want to mention that for everyone who watches our webinar to the end today, we will be providing our latest white paper on the journey to operational excellence, which includes guidance on what operational actions have the most impact on retailer revenue based on our over 500 million consumer ratings taken. And at the end of the webinar, we'll also be taking audience questions. So please submit any questions you have via the chat. Okay, and now I'd like to introduce our fantastic guest speakers. First, Brian Dennis is the Global Head of Retail for TruRating. He's a keynote speaker, best-selling author, and has an extensive retail background leading large customer experience teams for successful American retailers with over thousands of locations. For more than 20 years, Brian Dennis has been a customer service thought innovator who has demonstrated proven performance in his field. And we have Mohamed Latib, PhD, who is the CEO of CX University and PX Academy, and has been involved in CX work for over 35 years, designing CX workshops, leadership development, and cultural transformation. He has developed workshops and provided strategic consulting for brands such as Kohl's, Fossil, the World Bank, Singapore Post, and many others. Before immersing himself in CX University and PX Academy, he served as professor, dean, and vice president of several universities. Okay, and now let's begin. Welcome, Mohamed and Brian.
Hey, Mohamed.
Hi, Brian, and hi, Marty. It's such a pleasure to be here. Is this like the thumbs up to get going, Marty, or do you have another observation to share?
No, this is the thumbs up. Thank you guys for joining. Mohamed, I'm going to start with you with the first question. You've built a business and career on studying insights and complex data progressions that yield learnings and improvement. Tell me about the power of insights and why it's been your life's work.
Thank you. First, thank you, Marty, for having me here, and thank you, Brian, for being able to once again share the stage with you. And I've often said that when we share stages, we often think of it metaphorically as a dog and pony show. And I'm hoping that perhaps today, with the observations that both you and I are going to share, that we'd actually have that conversation and engage our audience so that they can come up with questions that we could respond to at the end. So I got to begin with what I just heard you say, Marty. You just said TruRating is successful because it's able to harness an 88% response rate. I cannot help but think of that as a data gift. If you've got that high a ratio of responses on your feedback protocols, you have a rich reservoir of data. And that's what triggers my involvement in the work that I do. I have established that even if data is reliable and valid, it is useless if it doesn't tell you anything. It is profoundly useless, especially when it starts to collect dust. For me, there is intelligence resident in the data, and that's what brings me to the notion of extracting this intelligence out of the data so that we can have insights that influence what we do. Sadly, most organizations don't even share data internally. What to talk of the power of the insights that they could share internally. My work has almost always been informed by a basic question. You collect data, you get this gift from your customers. You have to ask the question, so what? We have this data, so what? And that's the issue that needs to be addressed. So my work has revolved around strategic interpretations of data with a focus on not only answering the so what question, but whether or not the intelligence is relevant for the purposes that we had in mind. Is it applicable to make a difference? And what difference would it eventually make? If an insight, regardless of what it is, if it triggers a conversation, you've already felt it. You felt the palpable power of insights the minute it triggers a conversation. You know what I think what people need to understand is the days of purely intuitive decision-making is over. We now have a phenomena called informed intuition decision-making. In fact, Deloitte recently conducted a study and said managers, leaders are beginning to adopt this new approach to sifting through the data so that they can extract intelligence and support their guts with real, valid, and reliable data. And this becomes particularly salient during times of ambiguity and uncertainty, which is the theme of the conversation today. So at a granular level, we're actually seeing the whole notion of harnessing insights happening in daily practice in many organizations that have adopted the methods of design thinking. Let's just think about that for a moment. This is a granular level example of how we generate insights to solve problems through a combination of the creative process and the input of data that we find from our customers and from our internal data repositories. The combination provides us with just rich and fertile ground to explore the kinds of actions that become meaningful for our organization and meaningful for the people that we serve in the markets that we play in. Data by itself, we recognize is not enough, right? Recognize it's not enough. So why is it that people don't share data? And I'll tell you why. It's because most people don't understand data. And so I would submit to you that there's a need in the retail and non-retail world for organizations to begin to give credence to the enormous value of the data that they have in their databases. And Brian, I know that you and I have been in the retail space several times together, and you know that in the retail space, this is so profoundly important. Retailers should move beyond just numbers and scores. In fact, I advocate, and this is a more recent thought on my part, I advocate that you don't give the masses of the people in your organization data. I submit that you should give the masses of the people in your organization the intelligence that the data presents, the insights, if you would, that the data presents. And let that become what our employees should view all the time. And it also informs them on how to communicate with customers. So just think about it. There's an empowering process. That's how powerful insights are. There's an empowering process that allows employees to be able to connect more closely with customers. And we know that the power of insights is best exemplified in behavior change. I mean, why else would we want to collect data other than to influence behaviors, right? In our work that we do as customer experience professionals, we talk about all the KPIs that we wish to influence, and that's the purpose. But for me, you know what's even more important, Marty and Brian, and I would welcome your take on it, and that is, how do we take the insights and create emotional connections? Customers who are emotionally connected, we know, become loyal members of our community. They're highly likely to become followers, and they're highly likely to spread the word. And the economic calculus of that seems patently obvious, I'm sure, to you and to those that are attending our session today. Significantly, brands will enhance their reputation and trustworthiness if they share these insights with customers. And so we have an obligation that if we're going to receive feedback, let's give back to the community that has shared that data with us so that we can establish a level of trustworthiness that is so critical to our success. I've also learned that, customer experience is everybody's business, absolutely everybody's business. Therefore, I would assert that insights from feedback data should be democratized, made available in every nook and cranny of organizations. And I will submit to you that the retail landscape is a perfect landscape to offer opportunities to establish deep emotional connections with all those people that walk in and out of our physical stores. And I would submit to you, even those that walk in and out of our digital outlets. I'll pause for a second, get a reaction, and we'll continue. I know there are many other questions that you have, but think of those people in the retail store, those customer-facing associates. They are intelligence assets. They are brand ambassadors. And what we need to do is give them the power, and that comes from the data we collect.
Mohamed, as someone who works in product, I'm familiar with design thinking and using data. It's gratifying to see that being adopted in the retail world. Brian, I wonder what thoughts you have.
Yeah, I think, first of all, Mohamed, great to see you again. I think we were last together at the Customer Experience World Conference in South Africa. So it's nice to be with you again via this. So, and I think Marty called us both old in our introduction. But yeah, I think you hit it. And as I think about kind of the roadmap to excellence, right, which is what retailers are trying to strive to get to, I always start at aligning on kind of the organizational priorities, right? And I start at the most basic level, and that's the associate level. And it's the understanding of the kind of the business goals. Do the associates understand, right? And are they charged with helping deliver these organizational priorities of the business? And you mentioned data and measuring the experience, because it's really difficult to understand how you're performing without gaining and better yet utilizing, these available resources that you have. And think about the associate, right? Many times they're given 10, 15 things to accomplish during the day. Which one's most important, right? Where do I start? If I have to clean a fitting room and there's a customer I need to greet, which one is the priority, And a great organizational roadmap with an operational insights program like you just spoke to helps guide you on the attributes that are most important to the customer, not necessarily important to you, not important to me, but the customer, right? And that develops the priorities for the associate to be able to execute on those insights. And aligning on organizational priorities, it's not just an associate challenge, it's the entire business, right? I'll give you a good example, and I shared this, I think it's a good example, and I shared this with my students last night. I was grabbing a coffee last Tuesday, and next to this coffee location is a sub location. They serve sub sandwiches, tens of thousands of locations. And by the way, they just spent $40 million putting in new slicers into this sub location. And then they spent another 20 million to brand it, right? It's kind of this declining comp store sales, and they're going to reinvent themselves. And I noticed at 10:45 in the morning, there seemed to be a lot of people walking into this sub sandwich shop, and they seemed more excited than they should be going to get a sandwich. And I couldn't help notice, as soon as they walked in, they almost immediately walked out, and they were less excited than when they walked in, that's for sure. And I would even argue some of them were kind of pissed. So I was wondering what was going on in it. So I walked over, and there was a big sign that greeted right in the entranceway, and it said, "We don't honor corporate promotions or discounts." And it turns out there was a big promotion to try out their new slicers and to try out this fresh meat and their new approach and rebranding that they did. And they were giving away free sandwiches from 8 o'clock or from 10 o'clock to noon. And this particular location didn't honor that promotion. So you had all of these customers come in excited, want to try a new sandwich. Could be new customers, could have been existing customers. You won't know, right? Because they weren't able to get the insights. And this particular operator thought the function of his business was making money, right, for those 2 hours. And that's not what the function was. The function of his business was about the acquisition and maintenance of customers, right? And he confused the function of the business with the goal of the business in making money. And I mention that because it's just so important that everybody is aligned on the organizational priorities, right? I just said they spent $60 million total on this effort, only to disappoint customers when they walked in the store.
Yeah, I love that story, Brian. Mohamed, I mean, as we think about that, what do you think are some of the must issues that retailers have to be addressing in these uncertain times?
Well, to some extent, Brian's already offered us some insights with just the example, right? But let's think about uncertain times. Let's be dramatic for a moment, because all of us will remember the uncertainty of the pandemic history that we now have survived. You know, in uncertain times, the first thing you're going to suffer from is information deficit. Prior to the pandemic, and I'm using the pandemic as the example of uncertainty, it's quite dramatic, but I think it makes the point. Prior to the pandemic, we had information, and that data that we had, the information we had, could not predict what happens as a result of this incredibly inflective event in our history. In those uncertain times, we discovered, as many retailers did, and it was forced upon them. It wasn't sort of a natural insight. It was forced upon them by customers and circumstance. The end-to-end customer journey changed in the retail world dramatically. New touch points surfaced that we never thought about. Consider that. We've witnessed, for instance, a shift away from, think about retail, right? What do we think about in retail? We think about touch point, merchandise display, availability of associates for support and help, checkout experiences, cleanliness, availability of parking. And I don't need to give you an exhaustive list of touch points. Now consider what happened when the pandemic came upon us. Those touch points became less and less relevant. What became relevant was my health, social distance, safety. And what did we do? And which is what's wonderful about the creative genius of the people that run the retail world and other businesses as well. We got into contactless payments. Did it ever exist before this uncertain time with the kind of velocity that we experienced? Can you imagine sanitizing measures in the retail space? I will give you an example of a small mom-pop hardware store in my neighborhood. Let me tell you, when we were in the midst of the pandemic, you know what they did to make sure that customers felt safe and healthy walking through their retail space? They put a sink outside for folks to wash their hands. And let me tell you, you did not touch the faucet with your hand. They had a foot pedal so that there was no contamination, and they had air dryers. Now think about that retail response. Very basic, but it met the needs of the customer. Social distancing. How often have you found yourself during the pandemic? And I did. I was at CVS, Trader Joe's, and other such retail stores, and you'd have lines outside the store with adequate social distance requirements. Mask mandates. Who ever thought about mask mandates, except during those rather dramatic, uncertain times? And then, of course, because the uncertain times in many ways curtailed our ability to interact with the kind of intimacy that we enjoy in a traditional brick and mortar retail environment, we accelerated our adoption of digital channels. Business resilience is a must in the face of uncertainty. And this resilience comes from creating the capacity to identify new channels of communication and new data collection paths as well. We saw this in 2008, 2009, if you can remember, when we had dramatic economic uncertainty. What did companies do? They used proxy measures for data collection, email interactions, customer care call logs, website sessions, social media data to make up for the deficits in understanding customer behavior at that time, I would submit to you, retailers who are able to harness data quickly in the face of uncertainty and smartly to reduce information deficits are the ones that are going to survive in the long run.
Well, I would add to that, Mohammed. Listen, I spent a lot of my time in store talking with leadership and associates, and I think the other thing that spun out is the consumer wants it to be easy, right? That's one of the things that came out of this is how do you make this frictionless and continue as an operator to remove steps and barriers to the customer experience. I've got a friend that likes to say sometimes the best service is no service at all, right? I was driving home this weekend and my wife said, "Hey, could you pick up some orange juice on the way home?" And just to my right was an Aldi. I went in, I knew where the orange juice was. I grabbed it. They had self-checkout. I was able to quickly check out. So for me, that was a really great, easy experience, right? For that moment, because that's what I wanted. Other times, some consumers are overwhelmed with choice, right? And they need to rely on the store teams for product recommendations, and the product knowledge and those kinds of things. So making it easy is super, super important. And here's the fun part, making it easy can drive significant revenue as well, right? We have a retailer that when they get the customer to be able to experience the product, try the product, it's about a 24% increase in average transaction value for that retailer. That's powerful, right? We've seen our grocer and convenience customers and product availability, and you can see those scores by time of day just slowly creep down, sometimes by as much as 4%. And then you look at that 5 to 6 hour. So you got to kind of figure those things out as an operator to make things easy. I've got this great quote on my wall that I like. It says, "A wise man doesn't give the right answers, he poses the right questions," right? So make sure you have a partner that's helping you develop those right questions to understand how you can make it even easier for the customer.
So if I may, pardon me, Marty, I'd like
Sure.
to just piggyback off of Brian's comments around easy, because I think that's a very significant variable. I mean, it's just profoundly common sense, isn't it? If you make the life of the customer easy, I mean, look at him. He's sharing a memory, right? And that's the whole intent of this journey to engage customers. How do we, to use Brian's terminology, make their lives easy and frictionless? And if we do that, we actually create memories. And in uncertain times, we have opportunities to do so more than in certain times, because people are very receptive. Of course, I think easy is a universal standard that should be applied no matter where we are in terms of our CX practice.
Well, maybe this is a question for both of you. I know we're getting close to wrapping up, but with so much disruption, the pandemic, and then inflation and supply chain issues, what lies ahead now for retailers? And is there something they should have on their radar or a magic bullet they should be thinking about? Mohamed or Brian?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I don't think there's a magic bullet per se, but I do challenge retailers to really dial in on those things that they can control. Right? We don't know what this economy will look like tomorrow, the next month, even the next year. Right? That's unknown. But there are those controllables that we do have the ability to influence, and that's where our primary focus should be. Right? It's like the old saying: one person's problem is another person's opportunity, right? So sure, there are macro issues out there, but retailers got to control what they can control. I'll give you another example. My wife owns a cooking school, right? And her business is steadily risen where she has to add more classes. So the old days, if you will, being a year and a half ago, she would look for somebody that could work 20 to 30 hours a week. Well, that doesn't exist, right? There's restaurants closing all around us that can't find some. So what can she control is how she was thinking. And she was venting one night. She goes, "If I could just find somebody just to work 1 day a week." And I said, "Well, do that." And she did. She went out and found this amazing population of foodies and moms that just worked full time that wanted to work 1 day a week for some extra vacation, or dads that wanted to work 1 day a week just to get out of the house. Whatever the reason was, she found this incredible population of people that wanted to work just 1 day a week. And then what came out of that, right, what you can control is all of a sudden they wanted to work the same day. So now she had a team on Tuesday nights that worked together, and they better understood each other's strengths. And while already a good service score, it was even better, right? So whatever you can control and the things that you have the ability to impact, go ahead and do that, right? And then she further looked at, how do I keep these folks that I just hired, right? So now she does a family dinner after the class where they sit around, what went right, what went wrong, right? Every associate gets paid the same night, including their tips, many times before they even pull into their driveway, right? So I guess I would just share with you the challenge is to put forth those efforts with those things that you can control and influence, because they'll make a difference.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Mohamed. I think given where we are with the time, it's probably a good idea that we start to wrap up and take some audience questions. So let's just summarize what I think we've heard from you guys. So democratizing insights is a must in retail. That's one of the themes that I heard. Measuring what matters is critical, and sharing that information. Affirm the personalization of customer engagement. Put the effort towards those things that you can control and influence. You were both talking about that. Align the entire business on organizational priorities. I think I went ahead too fast. Align the entire business on organizational priorities and develop the right questions that lead to actions that drive sales. So thank you guys. A really, really engaging discussion. Why don't we take some questions from the audience? Let's see if I can see a question here for Mohamed. Mohamed, you didn't talk about, or I didn't hear you mention AI, one of the big topics we always hear about that, how that's being incorporated into the retail landscape. Can you maybe speak to that and offer an example or two?
Yes, thanks, Marty, and thanks for that question. And I'd like to respond to that question at two levels. At the first level, we want to talk about the impact of AI on the infrastructure of businesses. And so what does that mean? It means that organizations will now begin to think about personalized shopping by adopting AI algorithms, by creating opportunities for smart devices to be used, such as optimal checkout issues like Nordstrom and Starbucks have. AI would also help us develop optimal inventory management, like Home Depot does on a daily practice. If you walked into a Home Depot store and you spoke to a sales associate, and you'll see that they have their smart devices and they can make immediate inventory changes as a result of a particular shopping. Natural language processing technology has allowed us to be able to navigate through social media channels and declutter the noise and create intelligence. It also allows us to engage in fraud detection and a whole host of other infrastructure types of elements. Let me offer you, and you know, Amazon, Walmart, Starbucks, they all come to mind in terms of adopting AI. Level two, if I may, for just a moment. Level two to me is the more important piece, and that is the humanistic option. AI is underway. Its velocity cannot be stopped. It is going to be embraced, and we're going to have to adapt and come to terms with it. But for me, here's what we need to do in organizations: is we need to reconfigure our cultures. We need to build safety scaffolds so that people are not fearful. We need to embrace and accept failure as a reality of advancing our agenda. We need to foster curiosity so that we can always be creative and ready. We must have guardrails to experiment so that we don't worry about consequences of trying great ideas that didn't work. And then we must build a tremendous change management capacity to accept and adopt the incredible power that AI is bringing into our lives.
Mohamed, thank you very much. Well, we're out of time. Thank you, everyone, for attending our webinar today. If we didn't get to a question that you had, we will respond to you individually. Also, please keep a lookout for our store operations guide Mohamed, Brian, thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Fascinating, fascinating conversation. Thank you. And thank you, everyone